The alarm shrieked through the corridors of Erebus 7, its red warning lights painting the maintenance bay in hellish crimson. Cale dropped his plasma torch and rushed to the observation deck, his work boots clanging against the metal grating. Outside the station's viewport, a sleek alien vessel spiraled through space, trailing fire and debris like a dying comet. He'd seen crashes before, mining accidents, transport failures, the occasional pirate skirmish. But this ship was different. Elegant curves marred by jagged tears, its hull bearing the intricate symbols of the Alterian royal fleet. A diplomatic vessel, far from any scheduled trade routes. The ship slammed into the asteroid's surface with a sound that reverberated through the station's hull. Cale was already moving, grabbing his emergency kit and sealing his environmental suit. The other techs would wait for orders, for clearance, for someone else to make the decision. But Cale had learned long ago that hesitation killed more people than recklessness ever did. The crash site was a maze of twisted metal and flickering flames. Fuel cells had ruptured, filling the thin atmosphere with toxic smoke that made his suit's filters work overtime. He picked his way through the wreckage, following the weak emergency beacon deeper into the ship's broken heart. That's when he saw her. She lay pinned beneath a massive support beam, her pale blue skin stark against the dark metal. Her hair was a cascade of crimson curls, matted now with something that might have been blood or coolant, he couldn't tell in the chaotic lighting. She wore armor that looked more ceremonial than practical, its intricate engravings now cracked and scorched. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Wide, luminous amber eyes that met his through his helmet's visor. Not the glazed stare of shock, but alert, aware, and filled with a desperate hope that made his chest tighten. She said something in her language, the words flowing like music even filtered through his suit's comm system. He didn't understand the meaning, but the tone was universal, a plea for help. "I've got you," he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him either. But maybe tone was universal both ways, because something in her expression eased slightly. The beam was massive, its weight distributed across her legs and torso. Moving it wrong could crush her completely, but leaving it meant certain death as the fires crept closer. Cale positioned himself at the optimal leverage point, his muscles straining against the environmental suit's bulk. "On 3, he muttered, then realized how ridiculous that was. Instead, he met her eyes again, nodded once, and threw everything he had into lifting the beam. Metal shrieked against metal. His back screamed in protest. The beam rose an inch, 2 inches, enough for her to drag herself free with movements that spoke of serious internal injuries. She collapsed the moment she was clear, her breathing shallow and rapid. Cale dropped the beam and scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he'd expected, her alien physiology lean and graceful even in unconsciousness. Her head lolled against his shoulder as he navigated back through the wreckage, the fires growing hungrier behind them. By the time he reached his quarters, chosen over the medical bay for reasons he couldn't fully explain, she was completely limp in his arms. He laid her carefully on his narrow bunk, her blue skin almost ethereal against his plain gray sheets. As he began cutting away her damaged armor to assess her injuries, one thought echoed in his mind: he'd just rescued alien royalty. The smart thing would be to contact Station Command, to hand her over to proper authorities. But as he worked by lamplight to clean her wounds, something told him that the smart thing and the right thing might not be the same. Vera's consciousness returned like waves lapping at a distant shore, first awareness of warmth, then the unfamiliar scent of human habitation, finally the dull ache that seemed to permeate every cell of her body. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself in a space so small and humble it took her breath away. The quarters were barely larger than her walk-in closet back on Altara Prime. A single bunk, a tiny kitchenette, and walls lined with maintenance manuals and what appeared to be hand-drawn sketches of mechanical components. Everything was clean but worn, functional without a trace of the luxury she'd known her entire life. "Easy," came a gentle voice, and she turned to see him, her rescuer. Without the environmental suit, he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 standard years, with dark hair and eyes the color of deep space. His hands, she noticed, were bandaged, and angry red marks visible on his forearm spoke of burns suffered during her rescue. "You pulled me out," she said in accented standard, the human trade language she'd studied but rarely used. Her throat felt raw, each word an effort. "Couldn't exactly leave you there." He moved to a small basin, wringing out a cloth. "How do you feel?" "Like a transport shuttle fell on me." The attempt at humor made him smile, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her chest at the sight. "I am Princess Vera of the Third House of Altara. I owe you a life debt." "I'm Kale. And you don't owe me anything." He approached the bunk cautiously, holding up the damp cloth. "May I?" "You had a fever during the night." No one had ever asked her permission for such a simple act of care. Palace servants simply attended to her needs without question, and nobles sought her favor through elaborate gestures. But this human, Kale, treated her like she was just a person. She nodded, and he gently pressed the cool cloth to her forehead. His touch was careful, respectful, nothing like the calculated caresses of suitors seeking political advantage. When he moved to clean a cut on her cheek, she found herself studying his face, the concentration in his eyes, the way he worried his lower lip when focused. "Your people will be looking for me," she said softly. "Probably. The crash site's been cleared, but there's been no word about survivors." "I figured." He paused, the cloth stilling against her skin. "I figured you might want to decide for yourself what comes next." The simple statement hit her harder than expected. When had anyone ever cared what she wanted? Her entire life had been choreographed by duty, expectation, and political necessity. Even this diplomatic mission had been arranged, a prelude to marriage negotiations with a man she'd never met. "Thank you," she whispered, and something in her tone made him look up sharply. Their eyes met and held. She could see her reflection in his dark gaze, but it wasn't the princess she recognized. This woman looked free, vulnerable, real. Without thinking, she reached up and traced one of the burn marks on his forearm with her fingertip. His skin was warm, the texture different from her own but somehow perfectly right under her touch. "You hurt yourself saving me," she murmured. "Worth it." His voice was rough, and she realized he was staring at her mouth. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Kale cleared his throat and stepped back, suddenly professional again. "You should rest. Your ribs are bruised, and you lost a lot of blood. I can make you something to eat when you're ready." But as he moved away, Vera caught his hand. "Kale." He turned back to her. "I would like to stay here, with you. If that's acceptable." The hope that flickered across his features made her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with her injuries. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's acceptable." 3 days later, Vera insisted on accompanying Kale to the maintenance bays despite his protests about her still healing ribs. She'd grown restless in the small quarters, fascinated by glimpses of his work through the technical manuals scattered around his living space. "You don't have to prove anything," Kale said as they walked the corridor, his pace deliberately slow to accommodate her careful movements. "You're royalty. Manual labor isn't exactly what I was born for." Vera interrupted, her amber eyes flashing with something that might have been hurt. "Perhaps not. But I want to understand your world, Kale. Your life." The maintenance bay was a cathedral of pipes and conduits, the station's mechanical heart laid bare. Vera watched in fascination as Kale explained the atmospheric recycling systems, his hands moving with practiced confidence over controls and readouts. There was poetry in the way he worked, she realized, an intimate knowledge of every system, every potential failure point. "Here," he said, guiding her hands to a diagnostic panel. "Feel that vibration? That means the secondary pump is running a fraction off optimal. Nothing dangerous, but if we don't recalibrate." His body was warm behind hers, his breath stirring the curls at her neck as he spoke. Vera found herself leaning back against his chest, ostensibly to better hear his explanation, but really just to feel his presence. "I understand," she murmured, though her attention had shifted entirely to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her shoulder blade. They worked together through the afternoon shift, Vera's quick mind adapting to the station's systems with surprising ease. Cale found himself stealing glances at her profile as she concentrated, the way she bit her lower lip when puzzling through a problem, how her alien features were both exotic and somehow perfectly familiar now. During their meal break, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his quarters sharing a simple protein ration, Vera asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why didn't you report finding me? It would have meant a substantial reward from my people." Cale was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently tracing patterns on the metal floor. "You looked terrified when you woke up. Not of me, not of being hurt. But when I mentioned your people coming for you." He met her eyes. "I've seen that look before. In the mirror, when I was young and my father would come home drunk." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Vera felt something crack open inside her chest, not pain, but something deeper. Understanding. Connection. "I was to be married," she said quietly. "A political alliance. The man is, not cruel, from what I'm told. But he is not my choice. Nothing in my life has ever been my choice. And now." She looked around his modest quarters, at the simple life he'd built through his own hands and will. "Now I choose to be here. With you." The words seemed to shatter the careful distance they'd been maintaining. Cale reached for her, his calloused fingers cupping her face with reverent gentleness. "Vera." She silenced him by closing the space between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted of desperation and discovery. He kissed her back with fierce tenderness, one hand tangling in her crimson curls while the other spread across the small of her back, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vera pressed her forehead against his. "In my language," she whispered, "there's a phrase, Keth Nala Mortharan. It means, the heart chooses its own path." "What's your heart choosing?" he asked, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "You," she said simply. "Always you." Outside, the station continued its orbit around the mining asteroid, but inside Cale's quarters, two hearts from different worlds beat in perfect synchronization, finally finding in each other what they'd been searching for all their lives. The news alert chimed through Cale's comm unit just as they were sharing breakfast, Vera's leg draped comfortably over his as they sat on his narrow bunk. Her bare shoulder pressed against his chest, skin still flushed from the morning's gentle intimacies. Breaking, search intensifies for missing Altarian princess following diplomatic shuttle crash. Royal Guard Captain Thane reports Princess Vera may have been taken by hostile forces. Vera went rigid against him, her coffee cup clattering to the floor. Cale silenced the broadcast, but the damage was done. In the sudden quiet, he could hear her rapid breathing, feel the tremor that ran through her frame. "Vera." His voice was carefully neutral, but she knew him well enough now to hear the hurt beneath. "Hostile forces." She pulled away, wrapping his sheet around herself like armor. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me." Cale sat up, running his hands through his hair. "Because it sounds like your people think you were kidnapped, not rescued." The pain in his voice broke her heart. She'd known this moment would come, had dreaded it even as she'd lost herself in the simple joy of being wanted for herself alone. "The marriage alliance," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't just political. It was necessary. My people are facing economic collapse. The Union would have provided crucial trade agreements, military support. So you ran." There was no judgment in his tone, just understanding, and somehow that made it worse. "I ran," she confirmed. "When the shuttle was attacked, pirates, we thought, but now I wonder if they were hired. I saw an opportunity. If I were declared dead." She met his eyes, seeing her own pain reflected there. "My younger sister could take my place in the negotiations. She actually loves Counselor Drex." Cale was quiet for a long moment, processing. How long before they figure out you're alive? The search pattern suggests they'll reach this sector within days. She moved toward him tentatively. Kale, I need you to know, what we have, what I feel for you, it's real. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced. Before he could respond, the proximity alarms began shrieking. Through the viewport, they could see the sleek lines of an Alterian cruiser dropping out of hyperspace, its hull gleaming like polished bone against the stars. They found me, Vera breathed. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Vera had insisted on concealing herself in the maintenance tunnels while Kale handled the initial contact, but they both knew it was a temporary measure at best. That evening, as they lay entwined on his bunk, possibly for the last time, Vera mapped every inch of his skin with her hands and lips, memorizing the taste of him, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. Their lovemaking was desperate and tender, full of unspoken fears about tomorrow. Come with me, she whispered afterward, her head pillowed on his chest. Leave this place. We could find somewhere they'll never look. You know I can't do that to you. His fingers combed through her curls with infinite gentleness. You have responsibilities. People depending on you. And what about what I depend on? She raised her head to look at him, amber eyes bright with unshed tears. What about what I need? What do you need? You, she said fiercely. Just you. For the first time in my life, I know what it means to be seen, to be valued for who I am instead of what I represent. I can't go back to being a symbol after learning what it means to be a woman. The comm unit chimed softly. A formal request for boarding permission, in the precise diplomatic language of the Alterian court. They're here, Kale said unnecessarily. Vera kissed him once more, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Whatever happens, she whispered against his lips, know that you saved more than my life in that wreckage. You saved my soul. Captain Thane of the Royal Guard was exactly what Kale had expected, tall, imposing, with the kind of ceremonial armor that had never seen real combat. He stood in the station's docking bay flanked by 6 guards, his expression carved from ice as he surveyed the humble surroundings. Maintenance technician Kale Morrison, Thane's voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. You will produce Princess Vera immediately, or face charges of kidnapping a member of the Alterian royal family. She's not here, Kale lied smoothly, his hands steady despite the plasma weapons trained on him. I found the crash site, but there were no survivors. Our sensors detect Alterian DNA traces in your quarters. Thane stepped closer, his pale eyes cold as space. Do not mistake me for a fool, human. Before Kale could respond, Vera emerged from the shadows of the docking bay, her chin raised in the regal bearing she'd been trained to display since childhood. She'd somehow found or fabricated clothing that approximated royal garments, her crimson hair bound in the traditional braids of her house. Captain Thane, she said formally. You may stand down. This man is not my captor. Your Highness. The relief in Thane's voice was genuine, even if his posture remained rigid. The entire fleet has been searching. Your father fears the worst. My father fears a failed alliance, Vera corrected quietly. As do you. The wedding preparations are complete. Counselor Drex awaits your return. Thane's eyes flicked to Kale with obvious distaste. Surely you cannot mean to delay the union for this. The dismissal in his tone made Kale's jaw clench, but he remained silent. This was Vera's choice to make. I mean to refuse the union entirely. Vera's voice carried across the docking bay with crystalline clarity. I formally renounce my claim to the throne and all rights of succession. The guards shifted restlessly. Even through their helmets, Kale could sense their shock. Your Highness, Thane said carefully, perhaps the trauma of the crash has affected your judgment. You cannot mean. I mean exactly what I said. Vera moved to stand beside Kale, taking his hand in full view of the delegation. I choose love over duty. I choose freedom over obligation. I choose him. The words hit Kale like a physical blow. In the months since her rescue, she'd become his entire world, but he'd never dared dream she would sacrifice everything for what they had together. Vera, he said quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned to face him fully, her amber eyes blazing with determination. You asked what I needed. This is what I need. A life where I wake up each morning and choose to be there. Choose to love you. Choose to build something that's ours. Thane's hand moved to his weapon. Princess, I have orders to return you to Altara Prime by any means necessary. Then you'll have to kill me, Vera said simply. Because I will not leave willingly. The standoff stretched taut as a wireframe until Station Commander Hayes arrived with a full security detail, his expression grim but resolute. Captain Thane, Hayes said formally, this is a human protectorate. Princess Vera has claimed refugee status, which we are bound by treaty to honor. As the Altarian delegation withdrew under protest, Vera collapsed against Kale's chest, the royal mask finally falling away to reveal the woman underneath. Are you sure? He whispered into her hair. Your people, your family. You are my people now, she said fiercely. You are my family. My heart chose its path the moment you pulled me from those flames. Later, as they stood at the observation deck watching the Altarian cruiser disappear into hyperspace, Vera pressed her hand to Kale's heart. Keth Nala Mortharan, she murmured. The heart chooses its own path, he translated, the alien words feeling natural on his tongue. And mine chooses forever with you.